Okay, good evening. This is the weekly blog, video blog, that I promised you from last week, that I'll try to get one out to you this week. And today, what I want to talk about is the statement by the president of China, Xi Jinping, who mentioned that, I guess, they were making investments in Africa, but folks should not expect, pie or something like that to fall from the sky. And here's what I want to talk about this issue. I think this is very critical for our African, both public sector and private sector leaders. A lot of times in the corporate boardrooms and around corporate America, or around most of the Western companies, what I've heard was, these resources in Africa that are under the soil. So whether it's iron ore, whether it's oil, whether it's gold, whether it's diamond. A lot of times, the statement I've heard in certain circles was, you guys are not doing anything with it. So these resources are supposed to be used for the rest of the global community, the world that we'll all be part of. So since you have all this gold and all this diamonds, and you don't even have the technology to get that gold and diamond out, you're basically wasting it. Now, so over the years, what has happened was, yes, so most African leaders had accepted that. Well, once they took a lot of these resources out of the continent and then processed, for example, diamonds, processed them, say, in Belgium, and then resold them and made tons of profit. Now, specifically for China, China is sitting on $3 trillion worth of reserves. All those reserves are not reserves from the United States or from Europe. Yes, you have some European companies and US companies who were there with some of these equipment, and then Chinese were there. So that's how somehow this money has shifted from the ground in Africa into Europe, US, and into China. So China is now sitting on $3 trillion of reserves, and guess what? Reserves, while people are suffering and while you have social impact, work to do, is a waste of resources. Just because it's paper money, or whether it was diamonds or gold underneath the ground, it's the same thing. You're sitting on $3 trillion of reserves, and you're not doing anything with it, while people in most parts, not just in Africa, but even here, something in the US and Europe, but especially in Africa, are suffering. So we need to take those resources that are now in paper money, or electronic formats, or in Bitcoin, whatever bit is in, it's sitting in waste. You're not doing anything with it. You need to take that money back and reinvest it, especially in the parts of the world, which is Africa, where most of those resources came from. And I bet you if the economists in Africa did all of the numbers, you would see how Africa was really a net, exporter of wealth from the continent. This wealth is now sitting in Chinese banks in reserves. They're not doing anything with it. Let's reinvest it back in Africa. And this is my guide to most of the African leaders in both the public sector and private sector, to be able to talk to these folks about, no, you're not really just giving us a pie from the sky. You took this from the ground because most of the time we couldn't do anything with it. You've made all this extra money. It's time to reinvest it. And while you were investing it, partnering with Africans on the continent so that wealth creation could also happen in Africa. That's my only statement for this week that I promised the last time, based on the Chinese president's speech at Davos in the World Economic Forum. It is not pie. Reinvest it because you're sitting on waste of capital, and there are folks, infrastructure in other parts of Africa that need to be reinvested in. And we're not saying bring it all back and just, and give it to us. Partner with Africans, reinvest all that money as much as we can so we can actually accelerate the pace of growth and development. And we can have a burgeoning middle class and wealthy population in Africa that will then in turn benefit everybody to rise. So as Africa rises, everybody rises again. Right? All the partners on the ground, businesses, vendors, Chinese partners, American, European, all the partners on the ground working with us to redevelop the continent. Key for us to do that. Thank you very much and have a wonderful, wonderful week.